All right, here with David Taylor, head coach of Oklahoma State Cowboys. I just finished a Landon Robidoux interview. You're sitting right here. And he tells a story how he and Sergio are doing pull-ups, and they're doing 50. They're supposed to do 50. And Sergio knows he does 51, and they're pushing each other. What's it like knowing that you've got a true freshman class, and that's kind of how they're challenging themselves? Because the typical athlete dynamic, you think about the coach is the one pushing, but it seems like the culture here is they're pushing each other. What's it like knowing you have those guys on your team for years to come?
It's exciting. I mean, I think that whole group, I think there was 12 of them that came in. They're kind of the foundation of what we're building. They're the first guys that shows that this is the place that they think they can achieve their goals, and that's meaningful. They all took a little bit of a risk coming here. Like they could have maybe gone somewhere else that was maybe more set in stone, or some of them had other plans, and deciding like this is the best place. And then you get here and then you realize like, it's still going to be really hard, and I think these guys have all continued to rise to the occasion, and just they've all grown together. They've grown at different times, like you've seen different, each guy like have growth patterns at different periods throughout the year, and some of them are on their second big jump that they're going through, and I just think it takes everyone kind of being on the same page, and that group is very motivated. Some are more self-motivated, some need motivated by each other, some need motivated externally, but they're pretty easily motivated, and that's typically a pretty good indication of guys that are going to be pretty successful.
Yeah. We're on the eve. It's the eve of the Iowa duel. You wrestled them in November. How different of a team do you believe you have from November to now?
Yeah, I think it's different. We've had a very, we started this year with a pretty inexperienced team. I think we had one really returning starter from last year, so a lot of youth, guys that traditionally hadn't been, doing this at this level, and just guys are making jumps, and it's been fun to follow that, and definitely hold the guys to a high standard, and I think that match was a good learning experience for this team, realizing, hey, again, like just because you wrestle here and it's not going to be an easy thing, it's going to always be hard. This group has the ability to make things a little easier on themselves. So I think it was a good learning experience. They responded well. After that, we responded well, came back and got third, and we've had some really good challenges this year. And but just like anything else, you do have some growing pains with having a young group, and but I believe they're continuing to improve. So excited to see how they wrestle this weekend.
There's been a ton of discussion. You've kept it mostly close to the vest on Jax Forrest, bringing him out here in January. Is there anything you're willing to share at this point, 24 hours before the duel, about Jax and him potentially wrestling at the Iowa duel?
Yeah, I just think, Jax, it's been, he's a pretty unique case, and it's been great to have him on our team, and it's injected a lot of excitement, and is really, I think everyone is part of that he's really become part of that class, that freshman class. And he's continuing to getting better, and we'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. Well, I'm glad I'm going to be here for it. You've certainly prioritized atmosphere, wanting this to be a show. What are fans in store for tomorrow?
It's just not a duel meet, I think, in a wrestling match, there's so many lulls, and there's pauses, and there's lapses in excitement. And we'd love to have firefights in every single match, but that's not always, great for, it's not always the best thing, and when you get to really tough matches, sometimes they're going to be a little slower. Well, in this venue tomorrow, there will be no pauses. There will be no lapses in time or excitement. I think we've really done a good job of taking a wrestling duel meet and turning it into an event, an event that people are really looking forward to. And we're drawing so many non-traditional wrestling people that want to come watch from around the country. And I think it's the power of Oklahoma State wrestling, mixed with this youth and kind of just the sleeping giant of this program. And it's fun. I mean, we really look forward to these matches because there's an entertainment value. I think our guys they like that, and it's a pretty special place.
A couple matches I was thinking about, particularly 25. Spratley Peterson, felt like Troy had the match, gives up the go behind and loses. What was your message to Troy immediately after that match, and then as you've led up to the rematch? What have you been saying to Troy?
Yeah, I mean, I think just dating back to last year, with Troy, and just, it's a tough weight class, everyone knows that. And he started off last year with we had that win over Volk, and just that was a good springboard for him. And had a few losses, and his losses last year, it was kind of like he was maybe lapsed a little focused, and then had a great national tournament. And this year, in his losses that he's had, I thought he's wrestled great. I really do think that. I think he's out wrestled his opponents, and in that weight class, you just have to capitalize and out wrestle him for full 7 minutes. And that's just what we're continuing to work on. I believe Troy has the ability to make any match he wrestles at 125 not a close match. But he also has shown he can win the close matches, and you need both of those things. So I just think in that match, it was just he got that first period takedown, and then he kind of just slowed down a little bit. So it's just finding ways to continue to challenge himself to keep scoring those matches. And that's just kind of the theme with our entire team, just continue to focus on, we have 7 minutes, and to keep trying to score points. So I think that's the difference for him, and he controls that every time he steps out there, and just continue to encourage that.
For Connor Doucette, he seems like a guy you've spent a lot of time with, trained with, traveled overseas with Connor. What has he shown you throughout the course of this season?
He's been, definitely like a leader on our team. He is the kind of the older veteran. He's had a lot of experience. He's been a part of different coaching staffs, and he's been a part of different. He's been a part of duels like this before. And I think for him last year, the messaging was like, dude, you can do this. You can be a national champ next year. And I think that was an enlightening thing for him. I don't know that was something he ever thought about. He's like, yeah, I have the ability to do it, but I don't know if I've ever really been told I can do something like that. And he really took it upon himself to just change. He changed his body. He's lifted. I mean, he's in great shape. He can scramble. He can get takedowns. It's just putting it all together, And I think, again, I feel like our whole team, all 10 of our guys, they have the ability to go out and wrestle at a super high level, and just continue to encourage that with Connor. He's a 6-year guy, but for a guy that's done things, he is still making changes. It's not like he's so stuck in his way that it just is what it is. He's definitely made a lot of improvements this year, and I really enjoy working with Connor, and just keep reminding him like he can finish this off and do what he wants to do.
What has separated Sergio Vega this year in your estimation?
I mean, I think Sergio's, it's his mentality, it's his mindset. We call him Killer Serge, and there was a time this summer where he was just kind of going through the motions, and maybe he thought maybe he was going to redshirt, maybe not. And there was just this period of time where he just had these close matches, and then the next week he made a jump, and just kind of when we sat him down, in the beginning of the year, he said, dude, you can be a national champ, and I think, again, it's like sometimes someone says that to you, and whether you've never heard it before or whatever, but it's like it resonated with him. And he's just kind of taken that on. And his first match, he stepped out here, he kind of put on a show, and he's risen the occasion to wrestle some really tough guys. He's got a really challenging skill set for people to prepare for. And I think as he continues to build confidence, he can be a guy who can be super dynamic and score a lot of points. It's been really fun to watch him grow.
Someone like D. Lockett navigating an undefeated season, as is Sergio. What is that like, carrying an undefeated season? You were an undefeated freshman. Does that carry a weight to it as the season progresses?
I think that's something that I think these guys, when they choose to come here, they're believing in the vision, right? And a lot of these things that these guys are going to do are things that I went through in my career. And I don't really reference them much, but I think it's just the advice that I give them comes from perspective of things that I felt. And I think just continue to challenge them. I think there's certain times that things are gonna be a little easier or a little bit harder. And I think just kind of trying to prepare them ahead of what it's gonna feel like, or what to expect, or how to continue to challenge themselves, and not really looking at it. I don't think you're really in this to try and go undefeated or anything like that. You're just trying to just continue to get better at wrestling, and these guys have the ability in doing so. Like, maybe that's possible. But it's just continuing getting better and just keeping things in perspective. I think if maybe you've be a place that doesn't know what it's like to carry that type of expectation, you can get caught up in that stuff. But know how to helping them understand what it's like, and just navigating those things.
How have you navigated the emotional aspect of coaching a wrestling match, where for years, how long you competed, you're just worried about yourself? Now it's your second year. What lessons have you learned through the first year and change of coaching?
I mean, always learning. It's definitely just not something I think you just come in with a mentality that you're always trying to learn. And you kind of talk about like players, coaches, and things. I feel like that's the approach that I have. I feel like I have a good relationship with the guys, and there's times that I'm hard on them, and there's times that I'm going to lift them up. I think the guys always know where I stand with them, and I think they appreciate that. And in doing so, I think that's where we're figuring it out. A lot of times we're figuring this stuff out together, but it's just, I think we can go out there and wrestle with a pretty calming presence because I feel like we do put a lot of work in. I think our team is very prepared, technically sound, and just continue to encourage them to, showcase their abilities, and that's a lot of fun.
What did you tell Jax after his match against Seidel?
I just said, man, what a blessing. Like this is an awesome thing to know things went about as wrong as they possibly could go, and you still can find a way. There's a lot of times when things don't go, when you're an athlete of that caliber and things don't go your way, they just don't go your way. And man, things went not good, and you still found a way, and that's awesome. To be able to have that kind of calming presence in a match of a lot of chaos. And I think just continue to remind him, as he progresses through his career, like not everything has to be chaos. It's controlled. And he has the ability to do both, which is really hard to prepare for. And I think that's where we're going to continue to see him grow as an athlete.
You wrestled at Penn State. Obviously, Iowa was a rival there to that program. Now you're here at Oklahoma State where it's historic. How different does it feel contrasting, maybe what it was like as a Nittany Lion and now here where it's, generations of bad blood?
I think, at Penn State, history really kind of started 15 years ago, right? Here you're talking about decades and decades and decades. This is the 60th overall meeting between the two schools. I think that's, this program has so much tradition. It's one of the oldest. Just the tradition here is it's ingrained for, grandparents to parents to kids. There are people that went to school here. The thing about with these, a couple of these matches, like just the random students that went to school here understand the significance when they went to school and they look forward to it, now when they get to come back. And I think it's cool to be a part of something like that. Just things that are meaningful. I think in wrestling, like, it's a niche sport and trying to continue to progress it to get more eyeballs, but just doing stuff where people care about stuff, I think is pretty special, and definitely people care about wrestling here.
Cool. Well, we're thrilled to be here. We can't wait to watch tomorrow. Appreciate your time. Do you have anything else before we let you go? No,
I think it's gonna be great. Looking forward to the match tomorrow, and two great teams, two great storied programs are gonna go and scrap, and it's gonna be pretty entertaining, and it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thanks, Coach.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.